A thing on a bridge. I live in the rural town of Port Hedland, Western Australia. And this is what happened on my walk. It was 2 Saturdays ago, on the 12th of August. I was walking alone at about 5:30 in the afternoon. I would normally have been walking my dog Charlie at this time, but she had gotten an eye infection, which was keeping her from sleeping and didn't seem up to exercise. Port Hedland is a coastal town near the northern end of Australia and is prone to heavy rain from cyclones. The annual torrents require an extensive system of ditches running through the town to drain water off the roads. There also tends to be a lot of empty land between blocks of houses, massively overgrown with weeds that are only occasionally burned or trimmed away by the council. I was walking along a narrow concrete bridge when I heard heavy breathing from the ditch below me. First I thought it was a drunk, then I remembered the time I was jogging through a park with my dog this time and realized that I was running straight towards a large, feral-looking mongrel dog who was poking out of the yellow scrub and baring more and more teeth as I approached. We forget how close we are to nature. I hurried along the bridge and looked under it after retreating to a respectful distance. There was nothing there. More relaxed and curious now, I walked back onto the bridge to ponder the origin of the sound. It promptly resumed. This time, I boldly leaned over the railing and looked right under the bridge. Again, I saw nothing more suspicious than empty faded beer cans. I straightened up, and stinking hot breath blew in my ear. It was fear that I felt, pure fear. Using some fancier word could only cheapen the experience. I fell back, facing the source of the breath. There was nothing I could see, but the heavy panting continued, and I was well familiar with that rotten flesh smell unique to the breath of a dog on a bloody diet. Before I even realized I should be getting up, there was a sudden invisible pressure on my chest. I expected paws, but did not quite feel them. Even now, I can't quite discern the shape of the force that held me, whether I was restrained by paws, claws, hands, or a flat slate. Vicious howling erupted in front of me. Thoughts of the dog filled my mind until I couldn't even see where I really was. That killer mongrel peeking his nose out the bush, coolly deciding how close he would allow me to come before he lunged. Unable to think straight, I imagined this was supposed to have happened, that I had fluked my way out of some cosmic debt, and now the collector was knocking. Then it was gone. I didn't move for some time. I wanted to go back there. It took me 4 days to get the nerve to actually do it, but I knew I wanted to go back. I thought about it for a while and decided everything needed to be the same. I arrived at the bridge at 5:30 the next Wednesday, walked up to the center and waited. After minutes of nothing, I realized what had drawn the thing to me. I began to picture the dog once more, remembered the lip pulling back and the stained points behind. As nothing continued to happen, I realized what was different from the first time. The memory no longer scared me. I thought about this and realized a few things. The first time I crossed the bridge, something, not a ghost in usual terms, I have no reason to believe it was ever even human, creating the breathing sound that I was free to ignore or interpret however I wished. It was only after I returned that the breath resembled a dog's. I think the thing offered me a chance to show it what I feared, and I did. I can think of 2 reasons why it acted as it did. Perhaps it wanted to help me exorcise my demons, so to speak, or in some way it wanted my fear for its own reasons. We forget how close we are to nature, but maybe some part of nature needs us a little closer. An ancient creature. It was early morning, between 5:30 to 6 a.m. I awoke to a bright sunny end of July day. The sunlight was streaming in through the open curtains. I had been in a deep sleep, as we had only gone to bed a couple hours before. I had time to open my eyes and catch my bearings. I was laying on my back with my right arm stretched all the way out, so it was hanging off the bed. My boyfriend was sound asleep next to me. I hadn't even had time to move, and in that split second, I had been awakened. I was just starting to wonder why I was awake when my body stiffened and every hair on my body stood on end. The only thing I had to move were my eyes. They were as wide as they could possibly be open. It flew in through the window, and although I could not physically see this creature, it was clear as day in my mind's eye. It was more gray than black. It was reptilian, with a long, triangular face, a long, graceful body, black slit eyes, 2 wings, and a forked tail that was about the length of its body. Its wings were not fully outstretched, as it was gliding on whatever current of air it had caught. I can still hear the eerie stillness of its passing. As it flew in through the window, it lost altitude as it passed over our bed. The very end tip of its tail brushed my still stretched out fingertips and continued its flight path until, just as fast as it had happened, it was gone through the wall of the open closet. Throughout this whole event, my eyes following it was the only thing I moved. As I lay there in complete shock, I only had time to look over at my boyfriend, who woke up to see my still wide open, shocked eyes. He drowsily smiled and asked me what was wrong. Quickly, I recovered, smiled, and lied, telling him nothing was wrong. We hadn't known each other very long, and I didn't want him to think I was crazy. What I saw left me feeling startled and amazed. I knew it wasn't interested in us. It wasn't malevolent. It was an ancient power that just happened to cross our paths. I don't know how I knew this. I just did. I may have just written it off as a dream had my boyfriend not woken and talked to me. I know its energy woke him as well. We only stayed in that apartment for another month, leaving at the end of the summer. Nothing else happened. I only told one of my friends. She had grown up in the town where the apartment was and had heard stories of other things happening. The town is really close to American Indian reservations, and before it was settled, it was inhabited by American Indians for thousands of years. I don't know any of the native histories or folklore, but years later, my family and I went to a hot springs about 10 hours away. The American Indians believed the hot springs were caused by dragons' tears. Hearing this story many years after what I saw made me a believer, and I was able to put a name to it. I most definitely saw a dragon. I have seen pictures that were similar to what I saw, but people always likened them as demonic. I always had a hard time labeling what I saw as demonic because its energy was anything but. Thank you for reading. I'm curious if anyone knows any American Indian legends involving dragons or have any similar experiences. This happened in Northwest Montana. Cheers. Goblinoid. When my fiancé left his home to be with me, 7 states away, we occupied one of the rooms of the houses that faced the front yard. It was because of this we were able to witness most of this strange phenomenon that keeps happening around my house. It's an experience I wasn't wholly aware of until my fiancé started bringing it up. I'd catch glimpses, little flashes of white in the window that, when I turned to do a double take, weren't there anymore. An odd shape, something I couldn't define, hanging around the windows or near the rose bush. Oftentimes I brushed it off as the white picket fence, though rarely did I see this light anywhere near it. Though, as my fiancé settled into the house and began to get accustomed to it, he often commented about seeing flashes of light from the corner of his eyes. Once, he could have sworn he saw a pale white face staring in through the window. It was always at night when this happened. But one night, as we entered the house, my fiancé stopped abruptly and stared into the dark lawn. I stopped confused and asked what was wrong. He pointed towards the rose bush, claiming he'd seen for one brief second a small humanoid figure there watching us, clinging to the crisscross wooden screen. He'd been pure white, according to my fiancé, and didn't move, just one solid pose and a stare. Creeped out, we both moved inside the room. I didn't feel particularly threatened, just unnerved at the time. Sightings kept occurring now and again over the past year and a half. We'd always see something moving. A light when no cars were on the road, perhaps the faintest glimpse of a face-like shape in the window. Eventually, we moved to another room in the house, the largest one. This one cannot see the front lawn, so when the sightings of this odd white figure abruptly stopped due to our relocation, we started to forget about it. Friends were brought to the house as our new roommates, and they accompanied both rooms that could easily see the front lawn. But then, I saw something that made my blood run cold. One of my new roomies hadn't quite moved in yet, so the room was still totally empty. The door was open, the window was dark. I happened to look into the room and to the window. It was too dark to see the fence, and judging by the angles from the hallway, I wouldn't have been able to see it even on a bright sunny day. Just the house beyond it. So normally, this window was solidly black. But not this time. Perhaps I saw it for a nanosecond longer than usual, or it startled me so bad that the sudden burst of adrenaline let me take in one more details. But what I saw wasn't just a regular assumption of a face. I saw a broad, rounded forehead, which tapered into a long, thin chin. I saw sunken-in, hollow-looking eyes, dead black. I saw a long, thin nose, and an impossibly huge, toothy grin, the teeth of which I could barely see through the blackness. The rest of his face was a stark white, like porcelain. It looked very much like a goblin, and while it didn't look completely malicious, which is to say it wasn't glaring angrily at me, I felt my alarm level skyrocket. All this happened within a second or less. I slowed down as I moved past the door, stepped back slowly. It was gone. Feeling very cold, I quickly hurried back to my fiancé to report what I had just witnessed. Not long afterwards, I picked up a pencil and a paper and sketched out what I'd seen. As best I could from memory, I showed it to him, and he nodded, affirming that it looked a lot like the faint glimpses he himself had seen. I showed this picture to our new roommates as well when he finally moved in. It was the first day, and I felt the urge to warn him. It has been a month or two since, and he has reported already seeing this Goblinoid in his window, looking a lot like the sketch I drew. This, I'm not sure, is paranoia or otherwise, since he'd seen my attempt to sketch it. He believes in the paranormal, like my fiance and I, though none of us in the building seem entirely terrified of these repeated sightings. There's been no scratches on the walls, no footsteps, no bumps in the night, just this goblin-like figure, smaller than a human, that seems to enjoy hanging around the front lawn and grinning at people. I'm wondering what kind of haunting, if any, this might be. It may or may not help that we live under a power line. At night, very few cars are on the road, and it's so quiet that we easily notice when a nighttime car does roar past. Each of these sightings has occurred when there was no car on the road. While the picket fence is white, it is often hard to see through the windows during the night because the lights indoor don't quite reach it, and it never got as bright as the Goblinoid did. Is it possible that hauntings like this get stronger over time? I didn't expect to see our little yard monster that night, especially not in such shining detail. Any thoughts or opinions would be appreciated.